Well, Mr. Gehl, welcome to the show. And again, you are very experienced in cross-cultural communication and international relations. As we are fast approaching the end of 2025 and looking to 2026, this year for both US and China are very busy. I want to start with a question. At the beginning, remember during the Trump's first presidency, we talk about the term decoupling. And then eventually they moved to de-risking. From your perspective, looking back and also what's happening right now, how would you describe the relationship between the two countries?
I'd say confused, because I think, again, President Trump does not have a clear economic policy, and his negotiating style is not like anyone else. He's confused at best, in my belief. I'm sorry to say. So I think that makes it very difficult for a seasoned politician like President Xi to try to understand strategically how to position China vis-a-vis the U.S. and for the U.S. to come in with a reasonable expectations of what they want to accomplish on the interaction. Again, I hear President Trump going very hardline, but then come back and say President Xi's his great friend and they're going to accomplish a lot of things. So where it ends up, I think, will be dependent on the face-to-face conversations, which they'll have early next year, I believe, and be able to make some progress that way. Right now, the courts are determining if Trump's tariff powers are legitimate or not. Hopefully they are not. Those by constitutional law should be a power of Congress, unless there's an emergency. But President Trump had declared an emergency, but it's, in my opinion, as an attorney, it's not real. So we'll see where it goes.
Mr. Gehl, again, based on our last conversation, and we know you are a world traveler. And of course that you traveled extensively, not just about the US, not just about China, but around the world. I want to know, based on your previous experiences, what made you to be so interested that putting your time and effort in China? Because today, when we think about China, on the positive side, we see this as one of the largest economies in the world. And not only is a collaborator with the international community, but on the negative side, other countries from the US tend to see is a major competitor from the technological advancement to many other reasons. But again, coming back to you, what motivated you to spend so much time in this country, and what inspired you continue to make the effort?
Well, I think the main thing, when I was growing up, there was a very small Chinese community that you could interact with. So really, I didn't have any friends who were Chinese on that. I went to work for the Kohler Company and was the head of their environmental and part of their mergers and acquisition group on it. So I came to China in 1994 to do the first acquisitions for Kohler. So bought a facility in Foshan and Beijing, helped to build a facility out of Shanghai. But what was fairly amazing is when I came to China, that was so foreign, but felt so comfortable. I always felt at home when I came to China, and I have no idea why. But I also worked very effectively with the regulators, because I think, again, China and the U.S. Subsurface are very, very similar. I mean, people, love their families, value education, like to drink, and enjoy one another and their friends. And so I think that, that was a feeling that I really valued. And so I think I was able to be very successful because I dealt with people honestly. I expected people to deal with me honestly, and I met some amazing people, through my first year. So I worked for Kohler for several years, then I worked for some major law firms, and then I'd be the China guy to be able to bring small and medium-sized manufacturers to do their set up their sourcing in China. So again, it was a very good experience. I was able to go into the different factories and see the development again. as you can imagine, from when you were born, I was here, and kind of moving through the entire timeline to see the development of China is unbelievable. So I really respect, how China has developed, and now so amazed to see. I mean, they're the largest manufacturing environment in the world. Their monetary policy, I think, is one of the best in the world. President Xi bringing the anti-poverty program, I have so much respect for, to bring 70% of the people in 8 years out of poverty is unbelievable. So there's so many things. Again, when I first came to China, the environment was terrible. And that's when I would cite these plants. My personal philosophy for Kohler was that I had one standard worldwide. So I would impose the same standard in China as I did in the US, though they said, oh no, you can do it down here for much less. I said, no, we'll do it here, thank you. And that's when I talked to the regulators, they'd always say, first jobs, Tom, then we'll worry about the environment. And so that went on till 10 or 15 years ago, and then to their word, they have hit the environment. Look at the blue skies in Beijing today. When I came in 2016, I remember driving home from the airport at 4 in the afternoon. The street lights were on, but you could only see the floating orb. You could not see the pole because it was 600 parts per million of PM2. So it's changed so much. So I really admire that too, that China can move much faster than any other economy I've seen.
There's no surprise today, again, looking back, we know that great changes have taken place in China over the decades. But today, again, going back to the question, when people see China, people are saying that China today are portraying different images to the world. For one, it's what we call the Good Samaritan. Reach out to people, reach out to the nations who genuinely need help. But the second image, it's about power. China is not a ping pong ball that cannot be pushed back and forth. And the last one, it's about balance. Again, we know that China is not interested in meddling any international affairs and try to, again, be mutual or be friends with everyone. So from your perspective, Mr. Gehl, how do you think that China has been shifting this back and forth? And I know that during our conversation, that you had a lot of rich experiences, especially in dealing with businessmen, politicians, this political background. So putting everything together, how do you view these three different images, or how do you think that can really fit into the narrative today about China?
Well, I think that China has different faces that they intentionally portray. So I think to a certain extent they try to portray the generosity that they have and the benevolence that they have, but I think that's masking where they're beneath and they're really going for control. And so their U.S. aid is usually given without any payback. China foreign aid is always given with payback in debt. And so they've taken over a lot, and very strategically. So in Africa, where they've gone in and invested in railroads and harbors and things like that, many of those, because they knew that the governments couldn't pay it, they knew they would default and China would eventually have it. Malaysia, Indonesia, some of those countries, they built beautiful, beautiful ports, but they had Chinese companies come in to build them at an exorbitant profit, created a debt that was unsustainable because China knew they could take it back. So it's kind of two-faced to a certain extent, but it's also very strategic in how China is developing. But I think overall it is helping the world to develop, and so that's the positive thing at the end of the day.
I think, Mr. Gehl, when we talk about, it doesn't matter if it's political structure or economic structure, we need to look for the word called consistency. Again, as you mentioned many times, that we look at President Xi deliver the message and showing himself to the world, at recent APEC this year, and also numerous occasions for summits. I know that based on your political background, that you affiliated or had done some work during the Clinton administration. Talk a little bit about that. What brought you to the administration? What brought you the work or the project? And how do you think that when we look at the word consistency, has it changed? We'll look at the political structure in the States and also the political or economic structure in China.
Yeah, I was very fortunate in the 90s to be able to, that's when I was working for Kohler Company, and quite honestly, environmental work was very new. So nobody knew what the hell you were doing at that time. So I was given a lot of latitude so I could do whatever I wanted to. So I was very fortunate that my supervisor, manager at Kohler, supported me being involved in Washington, D.C. So I was they have the National Association of Manufacturers, NAM, which is the largest group of manufacturers in the United States. So I ended up being the chair of several committees for them. I was on some other special groups who were dealing, one corporate environmental enforcement council that was dealing specifically with working with EPA to try to make regulatory sense out of what was going on. Because again, in the US, my philosophy always was that, you just have to tell us where the measure is and we will achieve it. But you can't manage what you can't measure. So at that time, EPA was a little amorphous in what they were doing. They were having things that didn't make sense. So I appreciated that I was able to be brought in on one-on-one dialogues with the director and the heads of EPA to be able to say, from a business perspective, this is what we need to be able to, manage our facilities effectively, and how to reduce the pollution. So I was very proud at Kohler Company. We reduced our emissions by almost 80% in 5 years and made money every year. So that was my message to EPA. We can manage, and you can set up regulations effectively, and it will help the businesses. It won't hurt them. And before that, everybody thought environmental regulations would just be a cost. And that's what China has thought for too long, was that and a lot of businessmen don't want to environmental regulations because they're afraid it's going to cost them too much money. But they don't realize that pollution is a waste of your resources. So that's the more efficient you can be in your manufacturing process, then the more money you can make. So the clean manufacturing that's gone on, a lot of the industries have really embraced that. And China has seen the most advancement, over the last 10 years than any other country in the world. So I think that's that's a great, great thing that they're doing. And that's where I see that China has evolved into a government and a society which understands the need for sustainability and being able to do that. So, China is creating more renewable resources pretty much than the rest of the world combined. Adding photovoltaic, the solar cells, the wind power, doing, more with the hydroelectric. So very, very, but at the same time, they're the only country still adding coal plants, which I had a discussion the other day with a professor who was saying, oh, but China's an underdeveloped country. And it's like, I'm sorry, no. I'm embarrassed that you even said that, because China is, of course, one of the most developed countries in the world, and is only accelerating away from the rest of the world.
Mr. Gehl, we know that no country is perfect. We look at, again, the complication of the world today, the war in Ukraine, and also the uncertainty in the Middle East. Yesterday morning, there was an article came out from the New York Times, and regarding for the next year, the United Nations are going to cut the fundings, which is rather devastating, because we know that's one of the major power that able to help. China has been one of the strong advocate for United Nations. Again, we believe that doing great works. But on the other hand, in the article listed country as the US has been questioning the effectiveness of United Nations. We know that you have done some of the works also with the United Nations over the years. How do you see what's happening right now regarding the announcement? And why do you think it's so crucial continue for a country like China to be involved in the United Nations when we talk about the instability of the world today?
I mean, the very name, the United Nations, of course, that's what we have to all strive for. So again, I'm disappointed in the Trump administration's lack of understanding or lack of wanting to invest in social programs that can not only benefit the United States but benefit the world. So that's a whole nother subject, but we can have a whole show on that. But the need for an international body to be able to bring the different people together and try to have some standards that are set up and adhered to by the countries, and the ability to have some discipline for countries that don't comply, I think is critical for the advancement of our society. So I think that China stepping up now is another sign of their maturity. Again, 20 years ago, they couldn't do it because they didn't have the funding. They didn't have the international outreach. They didn't have the international view. They were looking in, they weren't looking out. But now I think President Xi is showing very good leadership in being able to embrace and really take over the role of the United States to a certain extent. I mean, it's to a certain extent, it's almost like a parent-child relationship. That the U.S. was out there before. They like to use China. China's the little child there. Good manufacturing. Come on, go out, dig in the garden, make our potatoes. But now China's grown up to be the farmer, and the United States is a little bit questioning because now they're not quite sure of their role. So we have this transformation coming in, and every parent-child relationship is difficult because when the child gets to be an adult, that's a completely change of relationships that have to go on. And I don't know if you've had that with your own parents, but as you become older, it's completely different how you are going to relate to one another.
That's right.
And how you can try to establish a new world order in your own home. So, and again, now we need to do that on the international basis. So it takes the whole family, out to an international concept, I believe.
Mr. Gehl, you mentioned that next year, 2026, it's significant because, again, President Trump has been actively posting messages on social media regarding his invitation from President Xi to President Trump to visit China. We know that we had some conversations, and again, looking at the complication of the relationship, one thing kept on coming up, and this is also quite, I would say, fascinating to all of us, is the topic on rare earth elements. Why do you think this all of a sudden become a crucial topic for both countries? And also in preparation, if President Trump were to visit China, how do you think this topic or this issue will be brought up and without creating conflict or friction between the two countries?
It will always create some friction and complication because it's an area where the United States has no leverage, in my opinion. China owns 95 to 98% of the rare metals that are needed for the advancement of semiconductors and most futuristic electronics. So I think that will change to a certain extent. That I think that we will, like anything else, like lithium batteries, we're going to be able to move away from lithium to new batteries.
Right.
Rare earth metals right now are necessary to be able to do any sophisticated electronics. So we need that. And China holds all the cards, quite honestly, and they know it, and they understand the power that's there. And so I think, again, though, because I'm thankful that President Xi is such an experienced politician, that he can use that in a thoughtful way to gain concessions, but still allow the United States to continue to grow. President Trump, again, has, I think, little understanding of the whole interplay in the market during his first administration, when he did the crackdown on a lot of the chip exchange and cutting that off. I was doing a lot of programs on it because it made no sense at all. Because the United States only does 20% of the work on a chip, they get 80% of the profit. China does 80% of the work, they get 20% of the profit. So the hardliners are always saying, let's make it all, let's have 100% of the profits. And now, so President Trump gave him the push to be able to do that. The CEO of Huawei did a couple shows on him, and he's an amazing guy. And he basically said, I could have made a phone that could sell for 20% of what any other phone would sell in the world and take over 100% of the market. But I didn't want to because I believe in international competition for improvement and bringing new technology and new thoughts in. So I really admired him and his philosophy, and but now President Trump, again, by trying to segregate it, I think puts the U.S. behind. And fortunately for China, unfortunately for the U.S., it gives China the ability to do it 100% homegrown, which within a year they will. So that's it. So the rare earth metals comes into all of this equation. But I think that President Xi will be gracious enough to work it out in a very strategic and a way that everybody can accept.
Two more questions. How do you think that President Trump's, again, if were to happen, the visit to China and smooth out the rough edges with China, is that a possibility that to boost Trump's credibility or image in the States and perhaps the help with the midterm election? And how do you think that the Democrats are able to respond and react to such journey or such relationship with China?
That is a really hard and complex question, mainly because one of the only things that Democrats and Republicans agree on is they hate China. So that's a solidifying fact because they don't understand China and they don't really understand how we are complementary more than competition for one another. So I don't know how, if Congress and the American people can be better educated as to how well China and the U.S. can and should work together to build both of our economies, then it would be very positive. But I think, unfortunately, people use it as a divisive means to say you always need an enemy. So that's during the post-World War II, as the United States was developing, when they set up NATO, Russia wanted to be part of NATO, but it was at that time they said no, basically because they needed an enemy. So we needed to set up the Soviet Union as the enemy from America, so then you've got something to bind against and move forward. So China, unfortunately, is there to a certain extent, I think, now. So how to weather that, I'm not quite sure, but hopefully we can have a better educated society and we can demonstrate how to do that. And I think that maybe part of the ramp up is to try to find, if China is willing to find ways to hold out olive branches, so then the perception can be changed as to it's not an us or them, but it's together. We can do so much more. So I think that, to me, that's what I would love to see happen, is that we have more cooperation on issues that are very public, and then that will softly change the perception on how if the American people can understand, if we do 1 + 1 can be 4 if we're working together, but 1 - 1 is always 0.
Right.
So that we have to be able to find that bridge to be able to do it, I believe.
Mr. Gehl, I want to ask you the last question. Recently, the former First Lady Michelle Obama attended an event, and she was questioned at the event regarding whether U.S. is ready for a female president, and she said no. Of course, throughout the entire year, we'll look at the elections locally, and we have a lot of rock stars, and they're women, and they took on this political role, from Republicans and Democrats. From your perspective, live in both countries and travel around the world, look at the intricacy of the politics today. Is U.S. ready for a female president? Why or why not?
Well, I think about this a lot. I'm legal counsel for the World Women Organization and spoken at all their events and work with them. I had 5 sisters. I've got 3 daughters. I think the United States is ready for a woman president. I think women, again, when you look at corporations with women CEOs, they always outperform male CEOs. And again, I think the skill set of a highly trained, highly educated woman for a political role is superior to a male role because again, you've got too much competition going in instead of trying to find ways of solving problems. So I think that, again, around the world, Germany, England have had some of their best leaders have been women leaders. So I would say I respectfully disagree with Michelle. I think if Michelle would have run last time, she'd probably be president right now. And a lot of people had lobbied for that, but at that time she didn't want to do it. But so I think it is the next president will be the person, and whether they're white male, black male, Hispanic woman of color, it doesn't. I think it won't matter. I think that we can. We're ready for a good leader. I'm disappointed. I don't see more great candidates out there. We have great people in the United States, but I'm so disappointed in so many of our elected officials. And so I think that we need the right people to step up. And then whether that's a man or a woman, I think that they can succeed regardless of their gender.
Well, again, Mr. Gehl, it's been a busy year for China, for the U.S. But I always say it's rather to be optimistic and wrong, and then to be pessimistic and right. So looking into 2026, hope that things will get better for both countries.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you so
Gehl.
much. Always
Thank
a
you.
pleasure.
Appreciate it.